Hello and welcome. This is the GA Freeman, an anti-statist atheist, here to discuss the case against the state. I always like to begin my discussions with definitions of the things that I'm going to talk about. So let's start there. This is about the state, so we'll start with statism, which is defined as a theory or practice of concentrating economic and political power in the state, resulting in a weak position for the individual or community with respect to the government. The state is defined as a politically organized body of people usually occupying a definite territory, especially one that is sovereign. The political organization of such a body of people. C. A government or politically organized society having a particular character, such as a police state or welfare state, or the operations or concerns of the government of a country. To define sovereignty, this is the absolute, supreme, and ultimate dominion of authority of a political state subject to no higher power, expressed within its territory in full self-government and in complete freedom from any outside influence. Also defined as total ownership and control of a property by an individual or other entity. A constitution. This is a fundamental and entrenched set of rules governing the conduct of an organization or nation state, establishing its concept, character, and structure. It is usually a short document, general in nature, and embodying the aspirations and values of its writers and subjects. The oldest written national constitution is that of the United States. Now, I particularly like this line, the aspirations and values of its writers and subjects, because it clearly spells out what people use a constitution for, but to define how the subjects are supposed to act, rather than limit how the writers are supposed to act. So in America, this is a piece of paper that is currently held as a contract, called the social contract, that no one in modern times has ever signed. In other words, like the Bible, it is an old piece of parchment with some old men signing it, that it is then a fantasy about an ideal that never really existed. Political. Political is relating to government, a government, or the conduct of government, or relating to or concerned with the making as distinguished from the administration of government policy. So ultimately, this simply means relating to the government or about how the government should be run. Latin term for government. The Latin base is split into two words, gubernare and mente. So gubernare is to direct, rule, guide, or govern. Ment is the mind. So per the original base definition, it is to control the mind. Government is to control the mind. So modern definition of to govern is to control or rule, to control the mind. So if to govern is to control or rule, then the essential elements of government consists of two things: a group of individuals and control, otherwise defined as the monopoly of force by a group of given individuals in a given geographic area exerting control through violence. Tax, by definition, is a charge, usually of money, imposed by authority on persons or property for public purposes, or a sum levied on members of an organization to defray expenses, also a heavy demand. Definition of control is to exercise restraining or directing influence over, to regulate, to have power over, or to rule. Authority is defined as the power to give orders or to make decisions, the power or right to direct or control someone or something. The other kind of authority is the confident quality of someone who knows a lot about something, or who is respected or obeyed by other people. Violence. This is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. I've laid out these definitions so that we can have a base to begin from. From here out, I want to discuss these definitions and put them in the context of the discussion. If you have any questions of what I'm referring to, please feel free to go back to the definitions just to understand contextually what it is we're discussing. To begin the discussion of the state, I want to cover the essentials of a nation state as integrated from the definitions discussed previously. First, the authority of the state. How is it achieved? Second, control. How does the state maintain control? Third, violence. Where is state violence? The reason I've identified these definitions is to discuss the validity of the state. If the state is a politically organized body of people, what does that mean, body of people? There is no such thing as a body of people. This is an abstraction. An abstraction meaning that it relates to or is involving general ideas or qualities rather than specific people, objects, or actions. As an abstraction, that simply means there is no such thing. It's not reality. It's an idea. And this idea is used for a group of individuals who are working together to act politically. If political is defined as of or relating to government or the conduct of government, and the government is defined as the group of people who control and make decisions for a country or state, and in this case, country or state is defined as a given territory or physical area, finally, to govern means to control or rule. A modern state simply means a geographic area where a group of people think that they control, own, or rule everything or everyone within that given area. Considering the definitions and the questions of control, if control in the political sense means to have power over or to rule another being, where does this power come from? In America, many argue that it comes from the Constitution, for as the Declaration says, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This suggests that the power in the government to rule comes from the consent of the governed. If authority is by consent, then the authority to rule me comes from my consent. Therefore, if I don't consent, then the state has no authority to rule over me. Correct? If this theory of consent is true, then I must admit that this is not my personal experience, as I have never personally been asked if I want to pay taxes. I have never been asked if I want a license. I have never consented to being governed. I don't actually consent to being governed, and I am still ruled against my consent. So where does this power come from? Where does any government derive the power to tax or to control the roads or to license my car or tax my property? Let's just consider one of these examples. What happens if I decide not to stop when a policeman turns on his lights and comes after me because he says that I'm traveling at a rate that is faster than he authorizes? If I choose not to be governed in that moment and I simply ignore him, what will happen? You can check YouTube and Facebook, and I can tell you from personal experience what will most likely happen. The police officer will do whatever is necessary to arbitrarily stop and accost me. He may call in other officers to help in this violent action. When I am finally stopped, I will be removed from my private property, my car, and accused and charged with a crime. I will be charged with something like evading arrest or otherwise ignoring a man in a costume with a gun. This could also be considered contempt of cop. Even if I was not evading arrest but simply not consenting to be ruled, I will be put in chains, otherwise known as handcuffed, and sent to jail or kidnapped and put in a cage. My car will be stolen and impounded, and I will have to get a lawyer to try and minimize the amount of time and money that I must sacrifice because I was traveling faster than another man said I should be traveling. My argument is that I stop when I see the flashing lights of the police car because I do not want to be imprisoned and attacked. I do not want to be chained and caged. I do not want my property stolen from me and then held for ransom. I do not stop voluntarily. I stop because of the threat of violence and even death. Where does the authority and control come from? The honest and direct answer is the underlying and overt threat of violence. I argue and can demonstrate that in every case, the consent that we offer is invalidated because of the underlying violence that the consent is based upon. Control or rule or authority is maintained within the given physical territory of the state simply by the underlying threat of violence. If you disagree, simply ask yourself the following questions. If you're a property owner, what will happen to you if you do not pay your property taxes? If you own your car, what will happen to you if you do not register your car? What will happen to you if you do not get a license and you are caught driving without a license? What will happen to you if you cannot or do not pay your taxes for whatever reason? What will happen to you if you try to start a business without government permission? What will happen to you if you buy or grow something that the government does not want you to, even if you do it voluntarily for your own use? Can you leave the country without permission? Think about the things that you cannot do without permission or without paying fees, and ask yourself, why do you pay those fees, and why do you get that permission? Let me offer a couple of simple answers to some of these questions from a personal perspective. If I do not pay my property taxes, then the government will put a lien on my house and steal it from me by force using sheriffs or men in costumes with guns, and then sell it on the open market to pay back those taxes. If I do not register my car and I am caught, then the police will impound my car, so steal my car, put me in a cage, and then ultimately sell my car in the open market. If I do not get a driver's license and I am caught driving by the police, they will initially ticket me, so basically give me a fine, but may in fact simply throw me in a cage and take my car. If I do not pay my taxes, then the government can steal my wages, steal my property, or put me in a cage. The reason that I participate in any of these activities is because I do not want men with guns to come and steal my property and or kidnap me and put me in a cage. I do not give any consent to any of these activities. I do them only to protect myself and my family from the violent threat of the state. If you think that this system is moral or reasonable by any means, then ask yourself the following. Could you go and make these demands of your neighbor? Could you tell your neighbor to pay you? Could you tell your neighbor to pay you anything, or that they owed you their car because you did not like how fast they were driving? Could you take their house because they did not pay you a fee that you said that they owed you? All of these activities and behaviors are immoral on their face because you or I could not exert them without violence. The government cannot exert them without violent force. And if the government operates on the consent of the governed, how can the government do something that you or I cannot do to each other? How does the state do violent activities that are immoral for you or I to do? The state is immoral. In the end, the state is based in violence and does not ask for nor require any consent. The state is a violent and immoral idea. The state does not exist, only people do. The people that act in the name of the state are the immoral, violent agents calling themselves authority. State speech is hate speech, and the only true type of it.